Shall we start by saying who we are? Do you want to kick off, Lily? Yes, I can. My name is Lily, and I've worked with digital learning in different settings for at least the last 15 years, both in the public sector and privately. A bit of everything, really. Yeah. And my name is Charlotte Cederström. I have a company called IT Universe, and I've had it for a really, really long time. I've been doing e-learning and digital learning for at least just as many years. And I was actually thinking, Lily, this is the first time we're doing a webinar together, but it's definitely not the first time we've met. No, you could certainly say that. Do you want to, how is it again? Yes, I think we're getting close to 20 years since we first joined forces, doing an academy program in leadership that we taught together. That's right, we did a leadership course together. Someone's writing in the chat that there's an echo on the connection. I don't know if anyone else has that issue. For me, it sounds totally fine. What's running here? But others are saying it's not. Anyway, we'll get going because we've got a really excellent little session here together. At least we think so, right? And, I've hit the record button, but don't let that scare you if you're out there watching and listening, because if you write something in the chat or do anything, or we can also open your microphone at the end if there's something you need to ask, then of course we'll cut that out of the recording, so you won't appear in any way if you say something, because we really do want questions, because it's actually pretty fun to get questions on something like this. But the question is, Lily, whether I should just, grab the screen and say what's going to happen. That's usually a good way to kind of kick things off, right? So there's a plan, right? Shall we do that? So I'll try this and just roll a slide forward. Let's see. I'm assuming we can all see it now. I can quickly check. Looks good, because the first thing that happens, meaning in just a moment, is that Lily will show an example, so we quickly get into what is this actually that we're talking about with this vibe coding for instructors? What can we use it for? Just to get that, oh, this is what you mean. Then I'll show a couple of slides where I briefly explain the principles we've discovered with this technology. Like, at a high level, what can you do? How do you get this material out to participants? And so on. And then the most exciting part, which is what takes up most of the time, is how you actually do it. And we'll take turns. Lily will show some great examples she's made, and I'll show a bit of what I've made too. So we'll show it inside the place where we're prompting, so you've got something to look at, right? And then, as I said, we'll do a quick wrap-up at the end and questions, but feel free to post them along the way in the chat because I can see it's working. At least the chat is. Lots of people are writing. I'll keep an eye on it, and Lily will too, in case anyone asks some good questions. Then we'll try to pick them up, okay? But I think first, full speed ahead. Lily, the screen is yours, thanks Charlotte. All right, here we go. I'll turn down my own sound. That's usually a good idea. Now we should hopefully get to show you something. And can you see that it says something about the 4 strokes in a petrol engine? It's just a little fun one I made, purely for fun, and it's made using only a prompt. A very, very simple prompt that I put into. I can't remember if it was ChatGPT or Copilot. I mostly use ChatGPT, but it doesn't really matter what you put it into. And I basically just wrote that it should create an interactive exercise as an HTML file about the 4 strokes in a petrol engine. The target group is young people with no experience in the topic. It could be an apprentice mechanic or someone like that. And then I wrote that it could include practical, real-world elements, and I'd like it to have a nice visual look. And I throw that into the prompt, and then it starts working, and it took about 5 to 6 minutes. Then I got this out of it, and I thought it was actually pretty good for how little I'd told it. And it's made like this. You should understand it as a supportive element for learning, because the people who are learning this have hopefully been shown and had it explained by a teacher along the way, but as repetition, or so you can go in and say, how was it again? Right from the beginning. And here I can show you that I don't know whether any of you are familiar with it, but most people probably are at some level. So you click forward, and you get an explanation up here of what's happening. We start by drawing in some air, then you click the next one, and it gets compressed. And underneath, there's actually an explanation in a bit more, what should we say, down-to-earth language. Next stroke. Well, that's where combustion happens, that's where the spark plug starts sparking, and then we have the exhaust at the end. And that way they can get a bit of repetition of what this is actually about, if it's hard to take it all in. And then there's a little task where you have to drag and drop your different answer options in here. That probably wasn't quite the right one, but down here I also have another option where I can type something and there's a question, and then you also get some feedback. You can expand that feedback, and this was a first attempt. First, what should we say? First take. We'll both, Charlotte and I, show you the process at a later time. But I've got something to start with. It might well be that I say, okay, something was missing here, for example. Then I know, why isn't it giving feedback up here? Down here, it only says 1 out of 2 tasks has been solved. There's something I need to go in and adjust. But as a first take, I've got something to work with. What I hope is that this made a bit of sense in terms of how quickly you can do this, and how, what should we say, easy and effortless it can actually be. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's almost paralyzing, honestly. When I think about how I've spent hours sitting and building interactive e-learning in all kinds of programs, nerding out with different bits of code and so on, to get things to work properly in different systems, and then you can simply get some drafts here, which of course you still have to work on until it fits the target group and what it says and so on. But we'll get into that now, how you steer this process so you get what you actually want. But I mean, just the fact that these language models have, so to speak, soaked up so much HTML code. They've got this monster library to work with, and that's why they can do this in an instant, where the rest of us would have spent hours making it work, and every time you had to change something, you'd have to go in and find the code and so on, so it's completely hopeless if you can't code at all. But here we just get straight through it right away, right? And trust me, Charlotte, I can't code, not at all. I can only teach. I've been doing that for a really, really long time, but I can explain what it is I want, because I do know what it is I want, and then this becomes fun, because you can see, wow, is that really all it takes? And then you get a taste for it. And this is what we always talk about, both of us, whenever we're dealing with AI. It takes a huge amount of professional expertise to make something decent with AI. So it's not like it makes everything, so we can all just use it to create this. It still takes a massive amount of expertise as an instructor to design materials with learning in mind. And then, of course, there's also this, and I maybe should have said it when I showed my page, that you have to go in and check whether it did the right thing or whether it's come up with complete nonsense. I'm able to judge professionally whether it's correct, but otherwise I get a subject matter expert to do it if it's something I don't know enough about. Is this correct, or did it just make up that story? Because it absolutely can do that sometimes. We know that, but let's take a look at what this is actually about, more in terms of the system behind it and what it all really means. Let me just grab my little Zoom thing down here so I still have a handle on it. A cat just walked through. That's how it is. Now, let me show you what it's about. The whole principle here is that, as Lily says, you create a prompt and you feed it into a chatbot, and then you keep improving it, just like when you make all kinds of other prompts, if you're used to that. But what comes out of it is an HTML file, a web page that basically anyone with a computer or a tablet or whatever can display in a browser. That's what's so fantastic. It's a format that works across all kinds of systems, and you can send it to individuals, like Lily and I do. We send it to each other, you have to see what I made, and so on, and then we can open it. But we can also give it to our participants, our students, whoever we teach, or we can upload it, like I do, to learning portals or integrate it into e-learning. So it has enormous potential, or it's already amazing what you can do. Because we can distribute it. That's always the problem. How do you get interactive things out there? But you can, because we create HTML files, basically like a website. And now I'll tell you, we've kind of identified 3 ways we usually get started with this. Either you do it in one go, so to speak, like what Lily showed with the 4-stroke engine, where she gets it to create both the content, the subject matter content, and the layout in HTML format. That's one way. That's if it's fairly simple and you don't already have material yourself. We also recommend, if it's a bit more complex, that you first prompt your way to some content or get the content created. Maybe you use another, what do you call it? Another language model. Maybe you use Claude for the content and then you move over to Copilot or whatever you prefer and do the layout so it becomes your HTML file. Finally, there's also what I do most often. I already have content myself, and then you do need to think about rights and all that. You've got that under control. It might be that I've written something, already have material, from some courses that I just want to spice up and then attach it, linking to it. And regardless of whether you use the first, second, or third method, you run it through your favorite chatbot, and out comes interactive material. That's the trick. You can transform something, either text you generate some material or something you already have, and turn it into something interactive. That's what's so phenomenal. Lily, we need to see more of how you do this. Yes, now you'll see. You're sharing. Something should show up on the screen any second. Someone was chatting. Yes, there I've opened my ChatGPT and I've got a task where I need to create an assignment for something. It's care, health, something or other, which I don't have any subject matter knowledge about. I need to create some exercises. I created them, or I had ChatGPT create them, and I also asked for a suggested solution because, that's a really good idea, so you can check it. First, up here, I asked ChatGPT to generate this based on some legal text. It has to pull out some elements. It did that, and someone has reviewed it and said it seems reasonable enough, and then I upload them into my ChatGPT and I write, as you can hopefully see, can you make the attached assignment with suggested solution as an interactive HTML file? The participant must be able to save the answer document as a PDF file, and please make it educational and include animations. And then it just gets going. First it thinks for a little over 2 minutes, and then something comes out. And then I go, I'd like a bit more on that. I'd like a bit more of this. And then we have this back and forth about what should be included. I think, we could use a bit more of that, and something's missing, or something is wrong, or something doesn't quite work the way it should. And at some point it becomes so long that I think, well, now I'm actually pretty satisfied with what it's making. And then I download the file, the HTML file. I just download it. And then I should be able to bring up the actual file. You can hopefully see it. There it is. That's what it looks like in finished form. And you can choose how, if you have logos or something you want to set up. I've added various things. There are little instructions on how to do it. You can hide or show the solutions. And then there are various questions down here, and there's a bit of help text if someone has a hard time getting started and says, I can't quite remember what I was supposed to do. And I also had it add guiding questions, so you're led even better along the way. And then you write your own answer down here, using the bar, maybe. And then I can actually expand a suggested solution as well, if needed. Again, you have to think about the fact that this is supportive and it's repetition, where you go in and say, they've of course been taught this, and maybe it's something these participants have practiced in real life. They've worked with it in practice, but maybe it's been a while, and then demands are placed on them. Now they have to remember it again. Well, then they can go in and look at this. When they're done with their work, they can go up and press Save as PDF. And then you actually get this, which most of us probably recognize. You go into the printer settings and choose to save it as a PDF file, and that means they have their own, what should we call it, notes or their own comments on their own computer. And that way we get through a perhaps heavy process in a more activating way. Yeah, great. There we go. And I mean, this is about the fact that the possibilities are endless. Just imagine how many different websites there are, and how different they are. And it's the same here. We can just make it. We call it teaching material, because it's basically what we know as websites. It's HTML files. So in that way, suddenly we can create something that would otherwise require coding. And that's the whole point. We get help with the coding and the layout. That's simply what this is about. I also have a few examples just to show a bit of variety, so you can see it's completely boundless. And we've talked about what the future will bring too, because it's mind-blowing. We have ideas for what we want to use it for, right? Because it's crazy. Now, I just think I'll try to share my screen. You're going to see something fun. I'm just about ready with something here. Let's see. Here's a little quiz I made at some point. You can see it was a while ago, about learning styles, something I teach, some pedagogy from time to time. And I made one where you get it on paper when you're sitting in the course. And then I also made a system where the questions relate to whether you're visual, auditory, or tactile. And afterwards you have to calculate which category gets the most points based on the questions. So when you answer these 24 questions, you get some indication of what your learning style is, just to illustrate this idea of learning styles. And it's fine enough to do at the table and fine enough to write on. But it could also be fun to make it interactive. I'd been eyeing that and thinking, it'll be a bit of a hassle to build it, having to code it and get it to add things up, and people should only be able to tick one box and not two in the same row, and all that annoying stuff, right? I thought it would just be complicated to make. So I throw it into my preferred one, Copilot so far. I mean, that can change. We know that. But right now, it's Copilot. Also, because there I've protected my files, because I have a secure setup, right? So only my own organization has access, so it must not use it for further training. You really have to think about that if you upload your own teaching materials. If you put it into a language model, it gets gobbled up for training, unless you have some kind of license and control over what it is and where it goes. You can see I've at least uploaded these 2 Word files, which were from my material I just showed, the questions, the 4 questions, and how they should be totaled. And then I write, can you create an interactive form based on the attached? I also explain a bit. The user must tick boxes, only 1 tick is allowed, and so on. You have to set the boundaries when you already have material. How should you understand this material? Just like if I ask for ideas for improvements, or when you prompt for something else. Here I just need to explain what output you should produce. And then you can see, like Lily does, it's also a little conversation, Copilot and me. It's not just one shot. And various things come out, and I can show you some of them. Then one came, and I say, give me the finish file as a link to download. Sometimes you have to squeeze it a bit, right? And then let me see. There's one here. Now look, that's what it looks like here. And then show the answers when they've answered all of them. That was one version, and then I move on and say, no, let's spice it up a bit. I think it was one that came in afterwards, because I also gave it some color codes, and I want it a bit narrower. I do things with the formatting and make it more professional and so on. And in the end, I also say, well, they should also choose widths and so on. I want it to look proper, right? And I keep going and going and going, pestering the poor little thing here. And I'd like a title too. It could also be some text, introductory text, if people don't get much information but just get this delivered from me before the course. I can see someone is asking, and I'll come back to this point about which model and about making sure you've got the right licenses. I have a Copilot license that ensures I can use my files and that it doesn't go out into the world. So that's something you pay for, a license, right? A paid solution, exactly, as Anne-Marie asked. So let me just add a bit more. I'd also like something graphical. I mean, you just have to wish. It's like making wishes. Just keep going. What do I want? What do I want? I want it better. I want it like this. Try this and do it like that, and so on. I also need people to be able to save their result as a graphical visualization with percentages, and so on and so on. And now you can see how far I got after I'd pestered it quite a lot. Then I get something like this with a little text, and there's a little box showing how many you've managed to answer. Now I'll just click through it, and it'll be a bit random, I have to say. And then you can save it. You can save it as an image, and then you can get your result. And it has added it up according to the whole system I asked for. I started thinking, Charlotte, about that thing where it keeps evolving all the time. My latest experiment is to try adding voiceover, and well, I have to admit that ChatGPT is a bit mechanical and machine-like and very obvious, and it speaks very slowly at the moment. But I also know that in 3 months maybe, or sooner, or maybe a bit later, then it'll become more and more fluid, because things are moving so fast and it can do more and more. And that's not really the big challenge. The big challenge is making something that looks really great and so on. It's exactly like the question about our security. We have to be very attentive and very focused in that context. Second, it's incredibly easy and it's great fun. Yes. And you might forget the security piece once in a while. No. But what you could also do is, we're just using the ordinary chatbots, right? But you can also use dedicated programs that are used to build websites, things like Lovable or Henosia and so on. Programs where you buy a license and where you have your things stored, and that also prompt their way to content. So maybe we could do a webinar about that some other day, but here we're just using what everyone has access to. But of course we need to have control of licenses and all that. I can probably squeeze in one more, I can see. I also had just some text. Again, this thing where I just pour a file into the prompt, one I have the rights to, about intelligence. I had written some material and then I set the conditions for it. I say it's an interactive form and there should be an input field, and you should choose the task where the participant has to select 3 of those intelligences they want to work with a bit further. And they also have to write about how they'll work further with them. So they have to type something. Kind of like in Lily's examples too. And the output should be a link to download and so on. Then that comes, and I think I just did it in one go here. Just yesterday. Can you see here? Then you get something like this, and I wrote that I wanted some foldouts. So that's that. And then I have to say, the thing that I think you also experience, Lily, is that sometimes you get furious at it, right? I mean, like when you've made something that works, and then you ask for a tiny change. And what happens? It crashes the whole thing. Yeah, and then it can't figure anything out at all. You get really annoyed, honestly. But, and that's where you and I might be a bit special, we keep going because we know it's a error 40. It's about prompting, writing what you want. And the clearer you are, the more precise it becomes in terms of what you get back. And I know when it comes out and looks weird, right? Okay, then I need to go look at my prompt and say, what did I actually write? Was I clear enough in the way I described what I want? Or did I have an expectation that it would just know? But it doesn't. It's not that smart when it comes down to it. No, I can just say, we also talk a lot, Lily and I, when we're chatting about all kinds of things, and we keep noticing that when we come up with something like, you've got to hear this. But we're also at the point of how do we automate this so we avoid having to write the same phrasing again and again. And I'm experimenting inside my Copilot with making my own agent. Like one where there's a bunch of prompts behind that little agent, so I can bring it along every time. So I can use that prompt I created beforehand and maybe share it with colleagues. If they don't find this easy, I can just say, help me get started, maybe. And then this one I made behind the scenes, inside that little agent, will tell me what to do. It won't start making interactive material until I've provided material, and then it sets it up in a specific way. I've given it some color codes, some fonts, and all kinds of things it should use, and the way it should do it. And then I can just tell it what I want changed, or write something, or upload something. Then it starts. Because I've built a setup in agents. That requires having Copilot. You can also make your own GPTs. I know that too. I also have a GPT that works pretty much the same way. What we could say now, if we were to sum this up, is that what really makes it fun for us is that it's fast. It suits us well. I can see there's also a question. I'll get to it. So, it's fast. It takes 5 minutes and 3 minutes to get a draft, and then you can distribute it because it's HTML5. Everyone who has some kind of device can open an HTML5 file because it's responsive and it works across all kinds of platforms, and it takes up so little space because it's code. When I make e-learning sometimes, it takes up a lot of space. But this is pure code, and bang. A small interactive thing might only be, say, 50 kilobytes, which means you can easily send it and get it out to people who can download it, even if they have a poor internet connection. It's crazy. It's basically like 3 golden eggs in one basket. That's how I see it. Agreed. So, let's see. Jimmy is asking, if you want to improve an AI draft, does the chatbot keep what's already there and add the new changes? Or does the chatbot start over every time you ask for an adjustment? It might be that Yes, it varies a bit, because I have tried building on top of an existing one where I needed to add something more, and then it gets a bit technical, because then you have to go in and copy the code and paste it into the original if that's what the question was about. If it was about when you're inside the chatbot, and chatting with it, as a rule, it keeps it. Sometimes it has some kind of glitch and then something weird happens. What I've done is that I usually start over and simply take it completely from scratch and then add what I changed. If it starts becoming too annoying, yes, what I do sometimes is I write in the prompt, and every time I need to make another change, I say, don't change anything except the change I'm writing now. Everything else must remain exactly as it is now. So sometimes I include that, and it gives some safety so it doesn't go off the rails and invent something completely new, because you really do have to keep it a bit on track. So that's what I do. If we have a couple of minutes left, otherwise we're early and we're actually exactly on time. That's how it is, right?